When God has done something big in your life, how do you make sure you don't forget what He's done? Well, God was about to do something big in the life of the Israelites as He was going to allow them to cross the Jordan River finally into the Promised Land. He didn't want them to forget what He had done, and so He tells them to build a memorial and to share it with future generations. Join us as we look at what God does for the Israelites and that they finally are able to enter the Promised Land.
All righty. So we are continuing our look at the book of Joshua in Joshua chapter 3 today, chapter 3. And we'll really look at chapters 3 and 4 as we go. All right. So where we left off last week in chapter 2, it was the story of Rahab. Joshua had sent 2 spies over to Jericho, and Rahab set them up, and they stayed with her. She protected them, hid them, kind of deflected, if you will, the posse who was coming after them. Sent the posse one way and then sent spies the other way, and so they were able to return safe and sound. They made a deal with Rahab that if she would tie this scarlet cord to her window, that anyone who was in her house would survive the coming attack from the Israelites. So they knew something was going to happen. They knew the Israelites were coming. And really, Rahab had confessed her faith that their God was the one true God. And we see that, down the line, she becomes the great grandmother of King David, and she is in the line genealogically of Jesus. And so her faithfulness is remembered even today. And so we pick up from there when we look at the last verse of chapter 2. It says that they, referring to the spies, told Joshua, "The Lord has handed over the entire land to us. Everyone who lives in the land is also panicking because of us." And that was information that Rahab gave them. So again, this was to encourage the Israelites as they're getting ready to cross the Jordan. And we briefly looked last week at what a difference that experience was for the Israelites compared to 40 years ago when they were first going to enter the promised land and how they were the one panicking. Whereas now it's the people in the promised land who are panicking. Doesn't mean that those in the land were not panicky when they were going to go in the first time. It was just the way the 10 of the 12 spies responded, because Rahab mentions the parting of the Red Sea. Back there, y'all understand our geography here. Back there was the parting of the Red Sea. That news had already hit the inhabitants. She was aware of that. And so not to say that the inhabitants were not scared, but they never really gave that a chance. Whereas they see that the Israelites were scared. Now it's the people who are scared, and the Israelites are going to follow God. So today, as we look at chapter 3, the big deal with today is after all this time, the Israelites are going to experience what God has promised and actually being able to enter into the promised land. So with that, I'm going to read the first 11 verses of chapter 3, just to kind of give us a little bit of background, a little bit of, really, this is the preparation that they go through before they enter into the promised land. And so this will give us some background as we get into their actual crossing of the Jordan into the promised land. So verse 1 of chapter 3. Joshua started early the next morning and left the acacia grove with all the Israelites. They went as far as the Jordan and stayed there before crossing. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God carried by the Levitical priest, you are to break camp and follow it, but keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between yourself and the ark. Don't go near it so that you can see the way to go, for you haven't traveled this way before. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourself before the Lord will, because the Lord will do wonders. Let me read in verse 5. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow. I don't want you to miss that. Then he said to the priest, carry the ark of the covenant and go on ahead of the people. So they carried the ark of the covenant and went ahead of the people. The Lord spoke to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so they will know that I will be with you just as I was with Moses. Command the priest, carry the ark of the covenant. When you reach the edge of the water, stand in the Jordan. Then Joshua told the Israelites, come closer and listen. So the words of the Lord, to the words of the Lord your God. He said, you will know that the living God is among you, and that you will certainly dispossess before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. When the ark of the covenant of the Lord of the whole earth goes ahead of you into the Jordan. All right. So again, this is the prep. They're getting ready to cross the Jordan. And again, experienced what God has promised all this time. What tends to be the centerpiece as they're getting ready to cross the Jordan? The ark. What is the ark of the covenant? Holds the Ten Commandments. Manna. Whose rod? Aaron's rod. Good. And so these are just reminders. Well, the Ten Commandments are more than reminders, but it had articles of really the elements as what got them out of Egypt and on their way, which include the Ten Commandments. Randy.
But the representation
Good.
of God being in their midst.
Good. The ark represented God's presence. In fact, it was even said that he had a box. The ark itself was a box. On top of the ark were these cherubim, like angels, and the angels' wings kind of extended to one another. And between them, it was said that the Spirit of God lingered. And so it represented God's presence. And so where it went, the Israelites went. Again, it was put together 40 years ago down at Mount Sinai and had been brought along with them all this way. Mike.
They think about all the other nations, they all had idols. They had statues said this. They can be handled by men. They are. If you touched it, you die.
Good. So one, to Mike's point, there were these rods, wooden rods that they carried it with, so not to touch the ark itself. And to that point, there you actually see this present itself in First Samuel and things that happened there. But second, though, too, is we see that only specific people were to carry the ark. Joshua calls out Levitical priests, so they were the only ones qualified to carry it. So even though you had these poles to carry it, it was priests who were the only ones who were qualified to carry it. So all this to say that as they get ready to enter the promised land, the ark was the centerpiece. God's presence was still there for them, and they were supposed to, as it got whenever they saw it, the priests get up and start to carry that. It's time to go. It's time to go at that point. Leslie.
I never thought about that, but like you mentioned about before, was it Uzzah or something brought down to be touched? Because they said it had to be on a cart. So now, years later, did God change the routine, and now the priest can carry it? So what's
No, the
What happened before you seen?
God never allowed them to put it on a cart.
no, it had to be on a cart.
No.
No,
by the poles, and when they put it on the ark,
On the cart. The cart was the wrong thing, but the poles are always the right thing.
we could see.
Yeah, wrong. So cart bad, poles good. All right. So where were we? Oh, Norman. Norman's going to clear this up for us.
See that they have this image here containing the 10 Commandments, which tell them not to have any images.
True, but it's under God's instruction. But I think it's really intended to be a representation of God's presence, a reminder of God's presence. Unlike us who have the Holy Spirit as God's presence in us, they didn't have that at that point. So it's really to represent that God's there. And that's why they're following it along, and really to be followers of God as they follow the ark.
He wasn't in the box.
He wasn't in the box. Right.
It's just a reminder, that they were not to worship the covenant. They worshiped God.
To Randy's point, they weren't to worship the ark. It was, again, reminder, but it was, not to be worshiped. To Nora's point, 10 Commandments say, do not have any graven images. Don't have any other God before me, kind of thing. Vicky.
God touched or dealt with his power.
Good. Of course, he provided the manna. 10 Commandments were his. He actually wrote on the stone. And the rod, what was so special with the rod, was that it was the one who turned into a snake and devoured the snakes of the magicians in Egypt. Wasn't really intended to go down here, but that's no problem. Any other questions on that part? Nora?
If you take the measurements of the box, it was too small.
The rods were actually on the outside. They were like these. Oh, Aaron's rod. Oh, okay. I don't know if maybe they broke it 2 pieces or something. They make these canes. They fold up. Maybe it turned into a snake, and so it was able to kind of coil up in the box. So before they go over the Jordan and go into the promised land, yes, the ark was there. And then Joshua told them to do something in preparation. It starts with a C. What? Consecrate themselves. This was a similar command was given to the Israelites 40 years prior in Exodus 19. And this is this is when they were arriving to Mount Sinai, and God was wanting them to be ready to receive the law. Exodus 19, verse 10 and 11 says, and the Lord told Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. They must wash their clothes. High standards here. They must wash their clothes and be prepared by the third day. For on that day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai and in the sight of the people. So this consecration thing was getting them ready to experience the work of God. Okay. Hop down to verse 14 and 15 of Exodus 19. Moses continues here. Then Moses came down from the mountain to the people and consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be prepared by the third day. Do not have sexual relations with women. So 2 main things with this consecration. One was external, washing of clothes, and one was internal, kind of this self-discipline perspective. And again, this was all in preparation to see the work of God. At that point, he was about to give them the law. At this point, they're about to see him follow through on his promise to enter the promised land. They're also going to experience him in that process. We'll get into that in just a minute. But consecration is this idea of being separated for a divine purpose. So the people, the first generation, they were being set aside for this divine purpose of experiencing God's work as he provided the law. This next generation are being set aside for the divine purpose of experiencing God as he brought them into the promised land. And again, it's this idea of being separated for this divine purpose. For us today, spiritually speaking, Jesus takes care of that consecration for us. It's through Jesus that we are consecrated. We are set aside for a divine purpose. Now, the divine purpose spiritually is really through the blood of Christ and through this calling, if you will, that we have by being his children, being disciples, Christians. So spiritually, that's really taken care of. But how might we consecrate ourselves today? Well, let me back up. Can we experience God today?
Yes.
So God is alive and active. Is there a reason or a means that we consecrate ourselves today? Now, again, going back to what Moses said, I don't want too much detail on how you might consecrate yourself, but how might we do that, again, externally or internally? Randy.
I think when we take the Lord's Supper, we are to examine ourselves.
So when we take the Lord's Supper, it's a...
And we usually have prayer before, so we think about it. Have we done anything that we need to be?
So it's like a self-examination before we take the Lord's Supper. And really, that's a biblical mandate. We're told to do that. So that's a pause and to say, okay, is there any sin that I need to confess and kind of get out? Anything else you can think of how we might consecrate ourselves today to get to be set apart? How do we do that?
Christ.
Okay.
Not accepting the world.
Okay, good. So really intentionally being following God's word, being different, not following the ways of the world is, there's the saying, being in the world but not of the world kind of thing. And being very intentional about that. Can consecration increase anticipation of seeing God do something? Yes, and I would agree. This is rhetorical, but I mean, what kind of anticipation did we have this morning as we were coming here today? Are we anticipating seeing God do a work here? And again, just rhetorical, but it's just one of those, as we come and as we gather together, are we anticipating seeing God do a work? Such as through his word, as we study his word, through hearing his word proclaimed. And I would even throw out there as a fellowship. Do we anticipate him moving even in amongst us as we are together? And if not, my point is that we can be. Maybe we should be. But it's one of those things where as they consecrated themselves, and again, we'll get into the whole crossing, they were anticipating God to experience God's work. So they were, again, for us spiritually, that's been done through Christ. But it's a mental thing, it was a physical thing, it was an emotional thing. They're anticipating to see God do something. They knew they were going to get in the promised land. I don't know that they really knew exactly. I mean, we already saw something about the priests were to go into the water. God hadn't really described what he's going to do yet, when they get in the water. But they're anticipating to see God do a work. And I think, and it doesn't mean that you don't experience God working outside here. But as we come here, do we anticipate seeing him do something, experiencing him? And even when we go home, day by day, do we anticipate seeing him do something? And it's just something I think it's good to keep on the front of our minds because we agree he is active today. And when we have big things, surgery coming up or whatever that might be, yes, God is a focus. But when we don't have something big coming up, you know, is he still that focus? Are we consecrating ourselves in anticipation to see him work? So anyway, I think it's just neat to see, one, God was consistent, what he did with the first generation, what he did here with the next generation, and what he does today. And consecration is just set aside for a divine purpose, but it's an act that helps prepare us to see God at work and be ready to experience that. So let's get into what this work is that he does. One more thing, and going back to Exodus, and again, there's some parallels between Exodus, the events of Exodus, and the events happening now, because Exodus was 1.0 of the promised land they don't enter, and here's 2.0. Exodus 34 verses 10 through 14. Again, this is God talking about what's going to happen when they go to the promised land. And the Lord responded, "Look, I am making a covenant in the presence of all of your people. I will perform wonders that have never been done in the whole world or in any nation. All the people you live among will see the Lord's work, for what I am doing with you is awe-inspiring." Verse 11, observe what I command you today. I'm going to drive out before you the Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Be careful not to make any treaty with the inhabitants of the land that you are going to enter. Otherwise, they will become a snare among you. Instead, you must tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, chop down their Ashtoreth poles, because the Lord is jealous for his reputation. You are never to bow down to another God. He is a jealous God. And again, going back to what Joshua just said, 1 verse 5 is consecrate yourself because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow. Here back in Exodus, God is telling the people that very same thing that he's going to do. Verse 10, he will certainly dispossess before you the Canaanites, this whole crew. And back in Exodus, he said this is what he's going to do. So he's laying the groundwork here in Exodus, and Joshua is just bringing this forward and say, look, this is what God told us 40 years ago is going to happen, and now it's about to happen. And so he just continues there. Well, the rest of this, and we'll do this as we approach the end of Joshua and begin Judges, he talks about this whole idea about getting rid of these people because he's going to drive them out. He's going to use the Israelites to do this. He says, if you don't, be careful not to make any treaties in the land that you're going to enter. Otherwise, these people will become a snare among you. And so we're going to see that play itself out on what that actually looks like as we go to the end of Joshua and beginning of Judges. So they are ready. They've consecrated themselves. They're right there on the edge of the Jordan, and they are getting ready to enter the promised land. This is a big deal to be able to enter the promised land. So jumping down, we're going to read verses 14 through 17. And it says, when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant ahead of the people. Now the Jordan overflows its banks throughout the harvest season, but as soon as the priests carried the ark reached the Jordan, their feet touched the water at its edge, and the water flowing downstream stood still, rising up in a mass that extended as far as Adam to the city next to Zarethan. The water flowing downstream into the sea of the Arabah, also known as the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, and the people crossed opposite Jericho. The priests carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all of Israel crossed on dry land until the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan. All right. So a couple of elements here that God kind of throws in here and says, okay, I'm going to show you how mighty I am. One is that what they're going to do is when they cross the Jordan is have a similar scenario as what happened when they left Egypt. They left Egypt. It was Moses that God used as kind of the, I don't know, the trigger to part the what? Catalyst. Good. I was looking for a big word. There's a catalyst to part the Red Sea. Here he uses again the Ark of the Covenant to be that catalyst. Now, I'm not even sure I know what that means, but it sounds good. To be that catalyst to stop the Red Sea, the Jordan. Now, again, going back to our geography, Daryl's been promoted to the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, and probably our Zoomers are going to be where the Dead Sea is. So they were promoted to the Dead Sea. So they're just a few miles north of the Dead Sea. And as they cross, and Jericho's over here, probably about where Herb is, they're crossing right here. The kicker right now with the Jordan is that it's a flood season. Couldn't God have waited for a better time to do this? But it's a flood season. Flood season, the Jordan can expand as much as 100 feet in width and over 10 feet high in depth at certain places. So it adds to an already difficult situation. What was the catalyst to stopping the water? What had to happen first? What did the priests do? Priests had to put their water in the foot. Priests had to put their foot in the water. And so how come God couldn't have just stopped the water and then they see the water stop and then they cross?
It takes faith to walk on.
It takes faith here. What's it matter if God does the stopping, which again is an impressive feat in and of itself. I'm not minimizing that. But then they walk over. It took faith for the priest to be able to step in the water first, and then it stops. Again, with flood season, it is very well that when they stepped in the water, they could have been swept away downstream. So it was not necessarily just, oh yeah, I'm going to put my foot in the water and know that it's going to stop. All they're told to do is put their foot in the water. They don't know what's necessarily going to happen next. Leslie.
It said in Jeremiah, it says that there is a significantly, Jordan had a dense thicket right along its banks on both sides. So that was added to.
Right. So getting through the dense thicket, Mike.
Follow Moses for all this time. And now Joshua is saying, okay, this is how we're going to do this. If God could just split the waters open, I don't think they would have looked to Joshua. God just
Good.
So God, Joshua being set up even more as the human element of this is the man I want you to follow. He's going to show you guys how to do this.
Good point. So it kind of elevates Joshua's influence by this happening according to God's instructions through Joshua. Good, Randy.
This was an act of obedience.
Hmm.
They were told, start walking.
Yeah. They thought this priest thing was going to be an easy job. No. So it's a faith issue, but also an obedience issue as well. Leslie. I just did.
Back didn't happen the same way in the back in the Red Sea when they were coming out of Egypt. This is a different generation. That was their parents. So they don't remember that. They weren't there when that happened. So this is a whole nother faith, like you said, it's a faith thing. If it was the same generation, they would have thought, oh, well, God did it before, he can do it again. But
Good.
Thank you.
So to Leslie's point, I'm repeating what Leslie's saying now. To her point is that, back at the Red Sea, that was prior generation. This generation went there. Had they been there, it's like, oh, well, God can do this. He's done it before. They didn't experience that. A second thing on the Red Sea, I'm adding to what Leslie's saying now. They were between a rock and a hard place back at the Red Sea. The Egyptian army is coming after them. So either they were going to have to face the Egyptian army or they're crossing the Red Sea. These guys, it was just purely obedience and faith that they were crossing the Jordan as according to what God had told them to do. They could have stayed over there, but God said this was the plan. I saw another hand. Bill.
I noticed that it says that God exalted Joshua. Went back and looked and see how God did that to Moses. He said, step into the Jordan River. Moses had to lift his staff. When the Jordan did stop flowing in, stop. This is almost 20 miles upstream. Water fountain.
So yes, and
Both stopped the bridge for the Jordan River when they crossed.
so I would just say they're copycats.
There's a lot of spiritual significance in that particular area. They crossed.
Good. It was also in the Jordan where John the Baptist baptized. It was what's his name? He was a leper, and he dumped himself. Balaam. Naaman. So there's a lot to the whole Jordan River and what's going on there. So again, it was act of obedience, it was act of faith. It was not a light thing. And even to Bill's point about this heaping of the water, already you're in something that's over your head. But the water heaping up is getting even higher and higher than the 10 feet or whatever. Beverly.
It says here that orderly, it says the Lord delights in demonstrating his power in circumstances that are important, impossible for us. No one can take credit. What happened?
Good point. And again, the point that it happened during flood season adds to the fact that only God can do this. Now, so with that, do you have something wrong?
Think about it. You had to get the millions of people over there one day. Yeah. That is a miracle of this song.
Yes, but also too realize that anything south of where the priests were now dry land. And so you had a strip, who knows how long. Someone can measure. How long is that, Bill? Between where the priests were standing and the Dead Sea?
Right, 10 miles.
10 miles. We might be making that up, I don't know. But it was a chunk of land. It was, so unlike the Red Sea, which you were stuck between two pieces of water, the advantage they had to get the whole nation over was anything south of where the priests were down to the Dead Sea was now dry land. I don't know how, I don't even know what it means to move millions of people, that distance. But even with that, still to get them over there. So one quick question though, on this idea about faith. Now, again, faith, we talked a little bit last week, everybody in here is exercising faith that their chair could hold them up. Okay. You can say all day long, I could say all day long that I believe a chair can hold me up. But until I sit in it, I haven't really demonstrated that faith. So when you sit in it, you're saying, okay, I had the faith I have in that chair hold me up. And there's a reason why I don't stand in it. But anyway, I don't have the faith y'all have. But in the same way, what was unique, what is specific about the Israelites here, they had faith to obey God. Okay. We may have faith, but if it's not of God, we're not going to experience God through it. Meaning that just your God didn't tell you necessarily to sit in that chair, exercise that faith. So just being in and of the chair is not going to be something you can experience God with. But to Beverly's point, to exercise faith that in things that we are not really able to obtain, but it's only through God, is really where we experience God. Not to say that we can't experience God in other ways, but if He's called us to do something, if He has called us to take a step of faith and invite somebody to church, share a testimony with somebody, help someone out, whatever that might be, as we take those steps, it's during those times that we will experience God as the Israelites did and see as the Israelites did. He's good at His promise. I get an amen on that one? All right, good. So they exercised their faith as they were crossing the Jordan River, and they were in their obedience, which I think is good as well. So they cross over and they get all the way over. At the end of chapter 3, chapter 4 picks up. They have now crossed, but God's not done yet. So we're going to read verses 1 through what? 7? 1 through 7 of chapter 4 and see what happens next here. After the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua, choose 12 men from the people, one man from each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from this place in the middle of the Jordan where the priests are standing, carry them with you, set them down at the place where you spend the night. So Joshua summoned 12 men he had selected from the Israelites, one man from each tribe, and said to them, go across to the ark of the Lord, which is still in the middle of the Jordan at this point. The Lord your God in the middle of the Jordan. Each of you lift a stone onto your shoulder, one for each of the Israelite tribes, so that this will be a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean to you? You should tell them, the water of the Jordan was cut off in front of the ark of the Lord's covenant. When it crossed the Jordan's water was cut off. Therefore, these stones will always be a memorial for the Israelites. So they are now in the promised land, but the priests are still in the river and the water's still backed up. And God says, okay, pick 12 men and one from each tribe, go get 12 heavy stones out of the Jordan and bring them and put them where you're going to spend the night. And what did he say the purpose of these stones are going to be? A memorial. Good. Now, could not God have saved them a lot of trouble and just like put those stones somewhere as a memorial for him? Why did he need the 12 men? He did. Good answer. What'd you say? Symbolic. Yep. And it's what God does. Good. Going back to that, he didn't need them to do this, but it was really to their advantage to be involved in God's work. Here are 12 guys who are one representing each tribe, and they had the privilege, as heavy and difficult as it might have been, to get a big old stone out of the Jordan and bring it where they were sleeping for the night. And we'll see later in chapter 4 what they do with them, how they make a memorial out of it. But it is one of those things where God includes us in his work. It's the way he does things, as Leslie said. And really, to whose advantage? One, Randy, and I agree, says that God doesn't need to do that. He's powerful enough to do it. Why does he include us in his work? Obedience. Good. What? So we'll remember.
Yeah, we remember the bells.
Well, yeah, but in general, when he includes us in his work, that's what? A family thing. Good. And so really it's a time for us to experience him. We experience him when we are doing his work, the things that he has included us to do. Mark.
I was just thinking that it gets us involved, and Debbie took the words out of my mouth, the skin in the game.
Yeah.
If,
Yep.
if we all know what happens when the government provides all your needs. We're seeing that in our country. And so they had to show that they were going to be obedient and be involved in it rather than just treating God as Santa Claus.
It's good. Instead of treating God as Santa Claus, it's a great way to look at it. Because again, if we're not careful, we're just busy taking. But two, for God to include us in his word. Oh, Steve, better late than never, huh? For us to be included in his work is really to experience him. Part of that is exercise in faith. But I don't know have y'all ever been in a situation where you feel led to do something? It's like, oh man, I'd rather be doing something else over here. Great time for a nap today, or whatever the case may be. But you feel led, okay, God wants me to be here, or God wants me to do such and such. And you do it. And you walk away and say, I'm glad I did that. You know, God blessed me by being obedient. And so he includes us in his work, really we have skin in the game, but it's also that we are experiencing him. And again, going back to what Beverly said, seeing the work that he can do, the work that's beyond us, that he can do. Now, these guys, there probably wasn't anything divinely inspired. Well, it was inspired, divinely involving them being able to pick them up, depending on how strong they were. But it's still an act of obedience, and they were participating in the process. They were participating in what God was doing, is how he was delivering this to his people. Now, going back to, and Leslie mentioned this, why is it important to remember what God has done? For these 12 guys to go to this effort, or for anything? Vicky.
Understand him.
So we understand who he is. What is the danger in forgetting what he has done? What's that? We fall away. Good. What does it do for our faith to remember what he's done? Strengthens it. What happens when we start to forget? We fall away. We become anxious. We are distracted, complaining. All these kind of things crop up when we start to forget what he's done for us. So for this case, God said to remember what I've done for you. I want you to build a monument, a memorial to me that represents this crossing. Now there's an element here. One is that they actually put these stacks of rocks together. If you look in chapter 4, verses 19, starting in 19 through, I think it's 21, it says, the people came up, am I in the right chapter? Chapter 5. No, chapter 4. Chapter 4 says, the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped at Gilgal on the eastern limit of the Jordan. Then Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan. And he said to the Israelites, in the future, when your children ask your fathers what the meaning of these stones are, you are to tell them Israel crossed the Jordan on dry land. So one element was to make them memorial. Okay. What was the second element? They were to share what happened. The memorial itself wasn't going to be enough. There's just a pile of rocks. So what really the memorial was to remind them to share with their kids what happened, and for that to go down from generation to generation. How do we today, what memorials do we have to remember what God has done for us today? Lord's Supper. Good. There's one. Yes, Gail. Cross, like on your necklace or something like that? Or right. Yeah, there. I knew there's one up there somewhere. What else? The Bible, good.
Sharing their testament.
What he's done in our life. How do we remember what he's done in our life? Journals. How many here journal? I don't journal. We need a journal. But that is a great way to remember what he's done in our life. Yes.
When I first became a Christian, we went through a class, but they had a start. One of the things was start prayers. And if you got an answer to the prayer, and it was just amazing. When you do that, I mean, how many times, you prayed for something and it was answered. I mean, that's just powerful to look back and see.
And to see that written out.
So, man, I'm not free to write stuff down now, but when I look back at all the stuff that he's answered, I prayed for and he answered specifically.
So to Gary's point, a way he journaled was to write down his prayer requests and to come back and write down how God answered that. And it was the amazing part was as to how spot on God would answer it. It wasn't a vague thing. It was like, boom, right there. And again, he could go back and look at that and see what God had done. Linda.
And in every door, it had a little thing that was nailed to the door. And it was like, I opened the door, and you would see a big figure of God and stuff. And she came to the house one day and I asked her, can you tell me what all these things are at your door? She said, each one reminds her that she was Jewish. Yeah. That keep God in our mind and, remind her. And like a memorial.
All right, good. And you even see that, I think it's called the Shema, the Lord our God, he is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The Jewish side of it talk about, put that on your door, on the mantle of your door, on your forehead, and all these kind of things. But again, it is intended to be a reminder. And I think it is one of these things where we need to be intentional, whatever that looks like. And I don't have a good answer for that, but to be intentional with how we remember what God does for us. Because to Gary's point, to see it played out and to be reminded how faithful he is. Part of the story here for the Israelites with that pile of rocks was not only was it that God stopped Jordan, but the purpose of that was that he was good on his promise to bring them to the promised land. And so it's just a reminder of God's faithfulness and how mighty he really is in the work that he does. So any other, Laura?
And we have to recognize every day miracles that he does that we just overlook,
Because many times we're too busy or we're just, you're focused on the wrong thing.
But I prayed for rain really hard the last couple. And God, no, it's a miracle. He answers your prayers. But we don't always thank him for what he does. We have to thank him because he takes care of everything. So
Good. Yep. So it's not just a matter of asking him, but we also need to thank him as well. Beverly.
Says here, like the text, we can be sure that God never fails to provide perfectly for his people during their time.
Good. That he and that provision based on God's agenda, not our agenda. Good. Very good point. Gail.
Themselves are reminders of the past, the present, and the future coming months. All points, all
They're what?
feast.
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 Feast. Feast. Feast. Right. Food. Yes. So yeah, and it did, and same way today with the Lord's Supper. You know, it's not quite a feast, but again, it is a reminder for both what He has done for us and to anticipate His next coming. So we probably need to wrap up at this point. Ron, will give us some nugget of wisdom here as we wrap up here. Say that again.
It's pretty simple.
Okay.
It doesn't usually remember, remind me that we don't jerk.
If you stop praying for it, the assumption is it was answered. All right. But again, I think the charge is for us to find a way for us to remember that as well. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. This cues us up. I believe next week we're in Joshua 6. And we're gonna just look a little bit at Joshua 5 as they get ready to take on Jericho in Joshua 6. And that's going to be next. So we're going to see how God gets them ready for Jericho, and then how they take Jericho and then go from there. All righty.